on into Drinks with Binks. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks, and we are still here in my Manhattan studio apartment. I've been switching up the locations throughout this entire pandemic because it's really nothing else that I could possibly do. This is sort of like the most fun thing other than drinking, because that's what we also do in the pandemic, lots of it. And, you know, we're so fortunate right now. We have so many sports going on. First of all, hand up, I never thought we'd have this many sports going on. I thought that none of them would be able to get off the ground during a global pandemic. I am wrong. We've seen bubbles work. We've seen a Stanley Cup be awarded. We're going to see the NBA finals come to fruition. We also have a lot of problems in the NFL right now. We had a lot of problems in MLB. So we still do have a global pandemic. Please wear your mask. If you're not wearing a mask, you're just a jerk and you're stupid. But on that note, we have so much to get here today on Drinks with Binks. I'm very fortunate to be able to welcome in a guy that you know well, actor, producer, director, Colin Hanks, coming to us all the way from Los Angeles. Colin, so glad to have you on the show. I know I've harassed you for probably over a year now to come on. And then as soon as you have nothing to do, I was able to be like, come drink with me for an hour.
It's all in the timing, Julie. So it's great to see you, Banks. Congratulations on all of this. I'm very stoked to finally be here.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's basically just Zoom drinks and I get paid for it. So I cracked the code.
Living the dream.
Living the dream. Just literally sitting here in my apartment drinking with you. And Colin, what do we have on tap here today? Because we always let our guests pick what we're going to drink.
We have a delicious, what is commonly referred to as a Crown and Coke. Cola of your choosing, whatever you may have, but Crown Royal. Cheers.
Awesome. I also have that. Cheers. I gotta say, Colin, I was very surprised and happy that you picked Crown because it's a Canadian whiskey.
It's a Canadian whiskey. That is true. I do love almost all things Canada. Yeah, it's been a weird pandemic. Started off pretty much strictly classic whiskey and tequila guy. And then there was, the whole gin and tonic era that was around Tiger King. That was when that was going on.
Yeah.
And then this summer, all of a sudden, I looked in a pantry and all I had was Crown and I went, all right, sure. And that's kind of stuck. So that's where we are on this pandemic drinking journey.
It's kind of like the seasons, right? So during the pandemic, like the different phases of alcoholism or none during this time. I think I started at rosé, and because I'm a basic bitch, I just continued with rosé this entire time. So it's sort of like it feels as though it's been summer or like spring, summer. You live in LA. It's spring, summer all year
time.
round.
Yeah, but I'm more than happy to go on record that's saying that Crown Royal is pretty much my pumpkin spice latte. So I'll roll with that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I have the original Coca-Cola with this, and you can't see it, but I do have a Drinks with Binks glass. Good. Because all I do is I'm leaning really hard into these shows, of which I do not own. But here you go. Cheers, Fubo. You own that
glass. You own that glass. So there you go.
But I will own Drinks with Stewart-Binks someday. Anyway, but speaking of the pandemic, Colin, actually, before then, what are we toasting to here today?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe that we can get over this thing and be able to go to sporting events. That would be nice.
That'd be real nice. Let's get over this thing by doing the things we're supposed to do and not cutting corners and not eating candy when we're trying to get our beach bod. And then we can go back to watching sports in person.
To being adults.
It's amazing how difficult that is.
Be adults.
For this country in particular.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have had many athletes, media people on the show who have been affected by COVID, of course, with sports being off, but then also the bubbles giving life to sort of a new situation. For people in Hollywood, like, what has this entire time been like, and how has that influenced some of the projects you've been working on?
Well, I mean, it's been weird, just like for everyone else. I mean, look, people tend to look at it through very rose-tinted glasses, and for some, that is appropriate. But for a large majority of the people that work in my industry, we're talking hairdressers, teamsters, union people, carpenters, every single member of the crew, everything shut down. And there was no work for a good solid 5 months there. And pretty much everything was no longer filming. And so I've never seen it. I've never heard of it happening before, where pretty much just everything stopped, just like everything else in the world. And there was a lot of conversations and a lot of people going like, well, what have you heard? Do we know, what's the plan? What's going on? How's it going to work? How are we going to get back on set? And, now things are sort of starting to gear up in this new sort of era that we find ourselves in, with different protocols for shooting and stuff like that. But I literally got cast in a show the day that it was announced that my parents had contracted coronavirus and the world stopped. I'm not saying it stopped because of them, but obviously them and the NBA, that was a pretty lethal knockout punch. And, I still don't know if that show's ever starting again. So I basically have just been developing stuff. I've been trying to come up with, writing scripts and coming up with pitches for TV shows, so that when things gear up again, hopefully soon, I will have had some work to show for it.
Right. And you mentioned that day that you get cast in something, and then, your parents get it's international news that they have coronavirus, because it was Rudy Gobert. It was all these sports leagues shutting down. What was that day like for you? Like, how did you find out about everything?
It was pretty surreal. I had known about their positive test for about 24 hours. And there had been a good 2 to 3 days there where we knew that they weren't feeling well, and we were trying to get them tested, and okay, they are going to get tested, and okay, they're waiting for the results. And all of this was happening while they were in Australia and I was in California. So there was, an entire day of time change in between, since they are ostensibly were living in the future. But once we knew, that was one thing. But then the announcement rolled out. That was a little bit of a surprise for me. I didn't really know that was happening. And all of a sudden my phone just started blowing up, and there was this sort of, I don't want to say a panic, but there was definitely a lot of people asking a lot of questions, and me realizing that, we needed to talk with my kids' school and things like that, just take basic precautions. I had to call my doctor's office and tell them, like, yeah, I was in there earlier today, but I haven't seen them in 3 weeks. I had to call up a casting director who I had auditioned for earlier that day and say, like, hey, just so you know, like, I haven't seen them in 3 weeks. They're in another country. So there was just a lot of, like, I mean, I guess you could call it like contact tracing, but without the contact part, it was a lot of that. It was a pretty stressful 24 hours for sure, just because the amount that was unknown at that time was a lot, and so there was just a lot of panic. But no point was I ever worried about their health or anything like that. I knew that they were in good hands, and I knew that they had been, been in hospital by that point. So they were well looked after. But yeah, it was surreal, because it was really, truly, that was one aspect of it, but the NBA shutting down, and then all of a sudden, like, everyone just deciding, like, oh, okay, this just needs to happen just across the board. And, I don't think a lot of people really sort of remember, like, the 2 weeks prior to that, where there was still just sort of like, well, will games shut down, or won't they, or what's going to happen? And I don't see it, so it doesn't bother me. And then all of a sudden, just across the board. So it was a weird 24 hours, I think, for everyone. But it was a little odd finding ourselves in that little bit of the eye of the hurricane, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's sort of, we see it was basically Rudy Gobert Tom Hanks, Rita Wilson, and boom. Okay, like the world is now shut down. So in a way, it's almost as if they're sort of part of history, at least in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I really sort of equate it to finding yourself all of a sudden in sort of like a BC AD moment. You know what I mean? And I don't mean it in that sort of literal sense, but that idea of finding yourself in a moment where all of a sudden everything that was is past is just precursor to this moment that we then found ourselves in. And then everything beyond that was basically adjusting to this whole new way of life and trying to figure out, what was going on, what was happening, and what all that sort of chaos was. Which is why I get really upset when people say like, oh, well, there wasn't any chaos. People were trying to calm nerves and all that sort of stuff. I was just sort of, no, it wasn't really like that. If you remember what those first 2 weeks were like, wasn't very calm, was it? I mean, I just finished off my bamboo toilet paper that I stacked for months. So I remember what that chaos was like.
Oh, yeah, it definitely was chaos. And in a way, we got to go to a break right now. But before we get there, just a quick update. How are your parents doing?
They're fine. They're all good. Yeah, no, they recovered quite well. They've got the antibodies and all that stuff. My old man actually went back to Australia just recently to go start the movie that he was supposed to start when all that went on. So they're all good. They're fine.
Very good to hear.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a whole lot more we want to get to with Colin here on the program. We mentioned Rudy Gobert and sports, and that is where we want to begin because Colin is a hockey fan, which is a surprise to me when I first found that out. We're going to discuss a whole lot more after the break on Drinks with Binks. Hey guys, welcome back to Drinks with Binks. I'm JSB. We've got Colin Hanks here on the program with us. We're sipping on a little Crown and Coke, or Crown and whatever else you have in the fridge these days during the pandemic, which is also a lot of booze. It's been great. It's been great. And so speaking of booze, hockey players love booze. And I met you in 2014 at the NHL Awards, which is a very odd award ceremony to begin with, because it's mostly hockey people, players. Everyone's very stiff in the crowd. Yeah, no one talks. No one talks. Like in the commercial breaks, everyone's just sitting there waiting for the next thing.
It is a very odd experience, yes.
Right. But awards folk, sort of the movie, the TV film type know what this is like from the Emmys and the Golden Globes and all these types of things. And so I was surprised, you being an American, being a hockey fan, just as a Canadian, I don't really assume a lot of Americans are big fans. Where did the love of hockey come from for you?
Well, when my parents split up when I was pretty young, and so my old man took me to what was then nicknamed the Fabulous Forum down in Inglewood, California, and he took me to my first LA Kings game against the Quebec Nordiques. This was in the 1987-88 season. It was the year before Gretz was traded to the Kings. So this is Forum Blue and Gold. This is Wayne McBean, Steve Duchesne, Luc Robitaille era. I think the score was 10-6. I mean, it was just some really, really bad hockey that was being played. But I absolutely fell in love, and shortly after that, sort of became obsessed. And then Gretzky was traded to LA, and then it was just sort of off to the races. So I've been a hockey fan pretty much, ever since.
Have you ever played before?
Never played. No. I would play roller hockey with kids in the neighborhood and stuff like that, but I never once played ice hockey. No, it was really just purely just a sport that I just loved to watch, but I never really played.
Well, the fact that you say ice hockey is definitely very California, because it's ice. You guys don't have not a lot of sheets of ice going around. There's not a lot of pond hockey happening. No. But you did mention roller hockey. But for an LA Kings fan, you guys have had a great you guys have had it made. Okay, I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. It's been absolute shit. You have had 2 Stanley Cups in the last couple years alone. And the LA Kings community is very tight, right? Like it's a lot of big names, but it's also a lot of people that love hockey. For you, what kind of maybe if you had any pinch me moments or fun, interesting stories with guys that play that you're sort of like, wow, this is sort of a cool thing to experience in the hockey world?
Well, I mean, I've had a lot. I had quite a few, and there was definitely a large handful of them during those 2 Stanley Cup runs earlier in the decade, for sure. Weirdly, one of the ones that I think was the biggest was there was a few years ago when Los Angeles hosted the All-Star game. They kind of had this thing where they said, look, we want to have like a celebrity captain for each of the divisions, each of the conferences. And you will put you in a jersey, and we'll have you do a little announcement pregame, and then you can like stand on the bench with the players during the game, and you can go into the locker room, and you are an assistant coach. And I was just like, fuck yes, like sign me up. I'm all in. And so I show up, and they give me a bunch of tickets, and I give them to my wife and, my niece and nephew. And I'm like, all right, I'll see you guys after the game. And I get down there, and the other 2 or 3 captains are like, Tim Robbins was one. Chris O'Dowd was one. I can't remember who the other one was. And they do the announcements, and they're like, okay, see ya. And then they go and sit with their families. I ditched my family completely and was just in the locker room all morning, all day, just standing around. And like, no one really asked me for credentials. No one really asked me what I was doing there. No one asked me why. They were just sort of like, oh, here's this kid, here's this kid. And so I just hung out. I mean, I'm a big believer in, just don't do anything uncool. And if they kick you out, stay until they kick you out. And they never kicked me out. And next thing you know, it's the end of the day, and I'm having a beer with the coach, and just going, and him going like, so what, why are you here today? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. No one else does. So I'm just here. You're
like, no one told me to leave. So I just kind of thought that, like, as an assistant coach, like, I'm here for, I'm coaching the guys.
I was. And, the other, like, the weirdest component of it is at one point, it was me, like, we were hanging out with the players, but then at one point it was just the coaches. And they were all just hanging out. Pete DeBoer, that's what it is. Pete's like, get in here, you're a coach. So all of a sudden I'm in a room with him, like Bouspadreau and Gretzky, and we're all just like talking. just talking. What are you up to? And all that sort of stuff. It was a very surreal sort of day. That one was fun.
What do a couple of coaches talk about there before an All-Star game? Like,
well, it turns out
an assistant coach.
A lot of nothing. Like, it's almost about as interesting as a commercial break at the NHL awards. It's a lot of just sort of like just killing time and being bored. So I had actually asked Gretzky about if it was true that one of his first NHL games that he went to was against the California Golden Seals, the old expansion team. And so we talked a little bit about that because my dad was a big Seals fan growing up. So we talked a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah. So your dad was a pretty big hockey fan, and that's how you've been able to get into it? Yeah. Yeah,
that was why he sort of got me into it, because he remembered going to a lot of games when he was a kid growing up in the Bay Area. So we just kind of like talk about that, and it was really just sort of, Brett Burns decided that I needed a nickname, so he started calling me Hanksy, and that was it. That was really sort of like
it sounds like your hockey name. Just add the Y at the end.
Just add the Y.
Yeah, for the most part. Or Stewart-Binksy. Depends on what network we're on at this point. But okay, we got to go to break. But very quickly, You got to drink with one of the LA Kings. Who are we drinking with?
You know what? I would probably I would have a drink with Brownie, to be quite honest.
Dustin Brown.
Let's just keep it casual and just have drinks with Brownie. So there you go.
Okay. Drinks with Dustin Brown. Doesn't roll off the tongue like drinks with Binks, but you know what? I bet you it's a whole lot more fun. We've got a whole lot more fun. What a tease, coming up after the break with Colin Hanks here on Drinks with Binks. Don't go anywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to Drinks with Binks. We've got Colin Hanks here on tap today with a little Crown and Coke, and we're just discussing his LA Kings fandom and experience being an assistant coach at the All-Star game. And I got to ask you, before we move on to a couple other sports, the Stanley Cup was won. We're shooting this on a Tuesday. Yeah. On Monday night, the Tampa Bay Lightning finally did it. They just, I feel good for them because I believe they deserve to win after all these years. But Drew Doughty, defenseman for the LA Kings, before the bubble and the pandemic, because it's been a long time for a lot of teams that haven't played, that didn't make it into the bubble. Yeah. So that it's winning the Stanley Cups this year it's not like winning a real Stanley Cup. How do you feel about that? Did you watch any of the Stanley Cup this year?
I'll be honest. I watched passingly. Without the fans, it's really, really hard. I don't want to short shift any of the guys out there on the ice. I mean, I have no doubt that they played hard and that they gave absolutely everything they possibly could in that environment, for sure. And so whomever, wins the Stanley Cup, look, they're the champion of that tournament without a doubt. But there is something, I think, strikingly different when there are fans in those barns, and when that tension is at an all-time high. I think it's very hard to replicate that with just crowd noise and laser lights. I think the NHL did a really admirable job. You can definitely argue, I think they've done it better than some of the other leagues, for sure, that have been sort of playing with this bubble or a not bubble in some cases. But there definitely was something missing to the overall experience, and it's not just the lack of not just the lack of Gary Bettman being booed when he hands over the trophies.
It was odd. It was like, something's off about this.
It was a little odd. It was a little bit odd. But look, I have nothing but respect for any hockey player that is able to make it through the gauntlet that is 4 series of best of 7 games. But yeah, I think there's something to that. But if you got your name on that trophy, you do not care. I guarantee you that. Anyone on the Tampa Bay Lightning, they do not care, because they did put together a pretty epic run there.
Very true. It was sort of oddly poignant or melancholy when they won, and you just hear Doc Emmerich was just silent, and you just hear them all cheering like they were like kids. Yeah. Because you don't hear the crowd, and you're just like, it was just sort of like, then you're like, oh yeah, we don't hear the crowd because we're in a pandemic and there's no fans there. And then it was just sort of like, oh, this happened. Like, I don't know. I felt sort of like, and then all the weird fireworks and everything.
And you can hear the fireworks go off. Yeah. They overpowered everything else in the arena. Yeah. I mean, look, there's definitely, that's definitely a part of it. You know what I mean? And as much as, I am so glad that sports are back, because when they were, when they stopped, it was a pretty gaping hole for a lot of people. It's been great having sports back. But look, it's what is going on in the real world is never far from my mind when I'm watching, the same as it's not far from the players' minds, when they're out playing those games. And when you experience what playoff hockey is, especially live, I mean, it is a special thing to see playoff hockey in person. And even though, you can't argue that it doesn't necessarily translate to TV, well, I'll tell you what, it definitely doesn't translate to TV if there are no fans there. Do you know what I mean? Yes. And I don't mean
the opposite is true. Yes. Yeah. So,
but look, it was nice having hockey end in October, only to start again.
It's all real weird.
When? I'm not even.
Yeah, that's the big question. I love that. Everyone's like, great, Stanley Cup. Yes, hockey. I'm like, so then what happens next?
Yeah.
When do we ever see hockey again? Everyone's like, oh, we'll see it again soon. You're like, really?
Has there been any conversations as to when another season would even begin?
I've been told by a source who works close to the league that likely February, but then again, do we even know what's going to happen in a week? Do we know if we're having an impending civil war? There's just a couple of things we got to check off the list before any of these things take place. Speaking of which, you are living in a city in LA. You're not an LA Lakers fan. You're also a Kings fan, right?
Yeah.
That makes it easy.
My sports team allegiances are a little bit confusing, but yes, I'm an LA Kings fan, but not necessarily a Lakers fan. No, that is correct.
Okay, so but as it pertains to the NBA, and the NBA finals are approaching its culmination, Lakers are in it. It feels like it happened 10,000 years ago, but of course, Lakers legend Kobe Bryant tragically passed away this year.
Yeah.
The Lakers are in the finals. What does it feel like to be in LA right now in the basketball world?
It feels both incredibly familiar and very, very different. I think the fact that the Lakers are back, I think, is for a large many of its citizens sort of like, yeah, of course they are. Of course they are. Do you know what I mean? Because there is this expectation that the Lakers are always going to win a championship. I think it's absolutely remarkable what LeBron James has been able to do, and AD and basically all those other guys. Because they weren't in the playoffs last year. So to be able to all of a sudden make it to the finals, that's nothing to scoff at. I really like LeBron James. I think he's an incredible player, and I sort of definitely root for him more often than I root against him. But the Clippers collapse was odd. I don't think anyone saw that coming. And then once that happened, it just sort of all of a sudden became like just this weird, like, nothing makes sense none of this makes sense anymore. The Lakers couldn't make the playoffs last year. Now they're in the finals. The Clippers are supposed to win the finals. They lose in the most epic fashion imaginable, and Doc Rivers is run out of town. It's just very odd right now. That said, everyone wants the Lakers to win in Los Angeles. That's just kind of how LA rolls. And I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, it seems as though you understand it. You respect it, at least from a basketball perspective, even though you're not a fan.
I mean, I've got a very long story that I won't bore you with too much, but I growing up a Sacramento Kings fan, I sort of swore the Lakers off for as long as Kobe Bryant was a player. And then right when I sort of got over Kobe, he passed away. And that all of a sudden became this very weird thing to experience as a fan, where this player that you hated for so long all of a sudden is no longer this, evil cartoony bad guy, but is really more of a human who, had an incredible life with his daughter and his family and all of these great things. And so that really sort of put my basketball fandom in perspective. And so I've just been enjoying watching weirdly, I've enjoyed the NBA playoffs more than anything. The NBA bubble, for whatever reason, I think that action is fantastic, to borrow the old catchphrase. And I've been really enjoying all of the games. So I'm excited for the finals. The NBA finals, the
finals,
plural,
not the Stanley Cup final,
but the NBA finals to begin.
I'm glad you understand that strife that we carry, because no one's a hockey fan, so no one knows that the Stanley Cup final is not plural, but the finals is.
We are in this foxhole together. I am with you. Don't worry. I hear you.
And on that note, we have a lot more facts coming up, because even though the LA Lakers are in the who calls them the LA Lakers?
LA Lakers.
The Lakers Even though we've been talking a lot about LA, we want to get into some things that are maybe this segue's really gone down south right now, but I was going to try to make an Orange County joke. I'm not. I'm just going to leave it at that.
You're just going to abandon it? Don't abandon it.
We're drinking. We're banking.
No,
we're going to take a trip to Orange County and beyond. Hey guys, welcome back to Drinks with Binks. We've got Colin Hanks here. We've been talking a lot about sports, but obviously we got to talk about your career. You've done so many different things within acting and directing, producing. What stands out as something that's most memorable for you?
Well, look, I always just try and keep myself entertained more than anything else. I mean, there's no real master plan here, but I always try and choose projects that I feel will be worth the time and energy and possibly a time spent away from my family to do so. But you know, I'm really proud of the documentaries that I've directed over the past couple of years. Those have been a great deal to me, and have been really a fun way to sort of exercise and stretch different muscles that I have. And, I really am still incredibly proud of the Life in Pieces show that I did for CBS for a few years. I'd never been on a series for longer than, a year and a half. So to be able to double that was quite nice, and to do it with such a great, cast of people. I think, I don't know. I'm just so incredibly lucky to still have a career. I mean, really, that in and of itself is enough, I believe. So I'm just happy to still be in the game, so to speak.
Yeah, and Life in Pieces, we had another alumni from that show, Thomas Sadowski, on our Drinks with Binks when we were in person. It was great. Also, massive sports fan as well. Rangers fan. That was probably tough, like LA Kings Rangers type thing.
Yeah,
but you're both Liverpool fans.
Both Liverpool fans, so we were able to talk about that, and we would just sort of be fans of the sport together. So we were baseball fans.
We were go sports. You're like,
yes, exactly. Just to be able to
actors that are into other things. Yeah,
to have that in common. Yes, we are actors, but yet look, we can also be into sports even though we have no athletic skill and cannot play them.
But you could play. You could play an athlete.
We can act like we can play them.
We could play. You can act like you can be an athlete.
Exactly.
And so you mentioned the documentaries and some of the different projects. Like, now looking ahead, what are different areas or themes, topics that attract you that you want to sort of pursue going forward?
It's funny. I'm always trying to find subjects worth sort of exploring within the doc space. There are definitely some that I got my eye on, but there's always the ones that I couldn't make that are the ones that are most frustrating. The one of them that instantly comes to mind is actually is one of the things I was talking with so one of the things I was talking to Wayne Gretzky about was I wanted to do a documentary about the SEALs because they were the last North American professional sports team to fold completely and just disappear, just just vanish in thin air. So I wanted to do a doc about that, and the other one actually. You might like, there was one that I wanted to do that was about the greatest curse in sports that no one is talking about outside of Canada. And that is the fact that Canada has not won a Stanley Cup in 27 years.
You're going to say that.
And I had a whole thing with it too, because, being a Kings fan for years, we had the curse of Marty McSorley, and everyone thought that was the curse of Marty playing with an illegal stick against the Canadiens in '93. That was somehow set a curse on the LA Kings, but then they win the Stanley Cup, so it can't be a curse, right? Well, I had a whole doc sort of based around the idea of, well, it was not actually a curse against the Los Angeles Kings, but the action of that somehow set that series, somehow set in motion a curse against an entire nation. The nation that actually loves hockey more than anything else in the world.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, so
right
I don't need to tell you any more about that. I could bore you with really fascinating.
Well, I mean, the players from the country I'm from have won the Stanley Cup, like in your country. So
every year.
It's not like a players thing. It's just like
every year
like,
Canada wins.
It's like the players, though, but from Canada win. Yeah.
In a way,
okay,
yes.
We got to take a quick time out. We'll have more with Colin Hanks after this. Begrudgingly, I'm listening to my producer. Oh, shucks.
Hey, I'm Thomas Sadowski, and I had drinks with Binks.
Welcome back to Drinks with Binks. We have Colin Hanks here. We're sipping on some Crown and Coke, and we're just discussing your career with so many of the different things you've done. Let's go back a couple years. Got to ask you about Orange County, just a legendary film and ahead of its time in terms of college admission scandals. You worked with so many big names in that movie: John Lithgow, Chevy Chase, Catherine O'Hara, Jack Black. You know, they go on and on. As a young actor, do you have a specific memory from any one of these people that sort of has stayed with you?
No, not really. I think more than anything else, it was just an incredible experience just having this sort of rotating door of people come in. Do you know what I mean? I think that was sort of the big learning experience. You know, I had never really been on a gig where you were in every single day and you were in every single scene. And so, you know, you liked it when people came in and they were ready to go and knew everything they needed to say and were ready to work. And the people that weren't like that, you were sort of like, okay, all right, well, I guess we're just going to make the best of it and keep going. And, you know, it was really more than anything else, it was just an incredible experience just to have those sort of moments in between scenes where you could just sort of talk and chat and pick their brain. And, you know, inevitably they would all ask the same question, like, how's craft service? Is it any good? You know?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, the sandwiches are good. Don't worry about the cold cuts. They're all fresh every day. That was kind of what it sort of boiled down to.
That's a good icebreaker.
Yeah.
You've seen craft services basically since you were younger. As a producer found this information for me. I didn't know you were PA on Apollo 13.
That's right. Yes, I was.
What was that like, working on a production that your father was the star of?
Well, it helped that he wasn't around any of the days that I worked. I worked almost exclusively during all of the mission control stuff. So I was one of the many PAs that were involved with wrangling 40-something male actors every single morning and day to try and get them to, you're needed on set. Can I get you anything? Getting lunch orders and stuff like that. And so once again, kind of found myself in a scenario in which I was getting an education. You know, I was working with a large group of actors that were everyday character actors. And there was, honestly, this is true, there was not a night that went by where I wouldn't turn on the TV when I got home and see one of the actors that was on that set that day in some role on television, whether it was a commercial or a walk-on role on a show or something like that. And it was a real amazing education in, just working hard and constantly keeping at it. And again, knowing who's nice to the PAs and who's not. And, and how fresh the cold cuts are. These are important things on film sets. These are important things.
Yeah, well, our senior production assistant, Danielle Garnes, I think I got your title wrong. She knows I'm a real jerk, so she'll remember that for her next job. Anyway, we move on from that. Love you, Gomsey. I just got to ask you.
Yeah.
I'm doing research on you. Not every interview, a lot of interviews ask you about your dad. how do you feel about talking about him all the time?
I think it's fine when it's organic and like, I don't know. If ask me on a different day, you'll probably get a different answer, to be quite honest. I mean, sometimes it's totally fine and it's not that big of a deal. Sometimes it's the last thing that I want to discuss, only because there's nothing new that I'm bringing to the table. There's no new nugget that I'm going to drop upon someone, because ultimately it's really not something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. It's not something that I spend a lot of time obsessing over. It's, just it's just my life. I've said this before, but in a strange way, I do think it is true. It's like if someone told you, hey, put this shirt on, and then everyone asked you about the shirt. I didn't pick the shirt out. This is what the shirt is. It's a fine shirt. I really like it. I mean, I guess it's comfortable, sure, but it's not my shirt. It's kind of the same thing. Like I didn't have any say in it, but it is what it is, and it's fine, and I get it. But you can sort of tell when someone has done their homework and they find an interesting way to get to it, as opposed to someone that is just, well, let me ask about you because I have to for 3, and then I'll just get to the one, which is, so what's he like? And that's a drag.
I was thinking it must be, I feel like I relate to you because like my mom is like that. She's like a big like spotlight stealer. So I'm always like, everyone's always like, what's Georgie Binks like? So it's like, I feel like we sort of get each other in that regard. But I was thinking, I'm like, man, he must just be so annoyed by every person asking about this. Cause I just thought about that today when I was just looking up some clips of interviews you've been in. I'm like, man, even like, the big time interviewers are asking you stuff about Tom. I'm like, I would just at some point be like, you know what, like, do you care? Like, can you just ask me about, and I'm not saying they aren't asking about you, but like, you're kind of like,
the weird thing is now, and look, I get it. I look and sound like him. I understand. This is science we're talking about. This is the way this works. We look and sound like our parents. Totally get it. But the stretch that people will go to, especially like on Instagram, it always makes me laugh, where it's like, it'll be me on a beach and all of a sudden it'll be about Castaway. It'll be me talking about the carpet at, the airport in Portland, and they'll go, oh, terminal. Like there's just, so many people instantly just go like, make this other connection. And I just go like, I'm not thinking of those things. It's
right.
That is always super, super odd.
You're like, come on. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So now, we've gotten that out of the way.
He's really great. He's really nice. He's super sweet. Yeah, he's great. He's super sweet. He never yells, and he smells like roses all the time. He doesn't know how to barbecue, though, which is a big concern for me. I have to teach him how to, actually do man stuff.
Well, maybe you could help also my boyfriend, too, because he's not very good at that as well. He's sitting right there, and he's probably going to be very upset about that. All right. This has been awesome. We've got one fun game coming up after this, guys. You don't want to go anywhere. We're going to play a little game of my favorite ye old truth or sip. So stay tuned. Colin Hanks on Drinks with Binks. All right, guys, we are still going here on Drinks with Binks. That's what happens when you have a couple drinks with me. And we are playing a game called Truth or Sip. It's ye old game I love. So I'm going to ask you a question. You can either answer it or you can sip it. There's only 3 questions, so you can only sip 2 of them. Numero uno. One actor or actress that you have to pick one person that you have to work with them on every project for the rest of your life. Who would it be? Oh, yes. Okay. That'd be difficult and also probably very annoying. Okay, so you only have one more sip left. The least favorite movie your dad has been?
Can I be honest in that I haven't seen like some of the recent ones.
Really? Name one you haven't seen.
The one that I haven't seen, I didn't see Sully.
Sully landed literally right outside my window here, man. Okay.
I know.
I haven't seen it either.
Yeah.
All right, that's our homework on Drinks with Binks. You and I will both watch Sully, okay?
Okay. All right. That sounds good. I like Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood is a great actor as well.
And he directed the movie, so it works.
And he directed it. Great. I didn't even know that there. Okay.
See, there you go.
Final one. One current NHL player you would want on the LA Kings.
No. Just give me some youth. Give me some youth, Binks. That's all I want. I want the new blood. Such as? I just want the new blood. I don't even know if he's been. I don't even know if he's been born yet. To be quite honest, these kids are so young now. Sure. Yes.
Leon Draisaitl. Okay.
Sure. Yes. Well, absolutely.
You're gonna have to get rid of a whole lot of cap space before any of those guys.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true.
But if and when we see hockey again, hopefully the LA Kings do better than they did this year. The only way to go is up or nowhere in a pandemic.
Or the last 4 years, if we're being honest.
Hey, you got 2 Stanley Cups. I got absolutely 0 over here, except for just trauma from the Boston Bruins, but we'll get into that on another show. We gotta go. We'll be back in a second to say goodbye. Hey guys, we've had an awesome time drinking and binking here with Colin Hanks. And Colin, what do you got for us? What are you up to?
Wear your mask. Register to vote. Make sure you're registered to vote and then vote. If you need a handkerchief, I make them and sell them at hankskerchiefs.com. That is not a joke. That is for real. That is a real company. You can find me on Twitter, but that place is a cesspool. You can find me on Instagram, a little better, still kind of a cesspool. Just tell the people you're close to that you love them, because we're all going to be getting real close very soon here. And that's it. Tip your bartender if you're out, which you shouldn't be. You should be home. That's all I got.
We are drinking and binking, and all of those wonderful places that Colin discusses, where you can also find this show: Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, as well as on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your pods. Drinks with Binks. Don't miss it. Rewatch it. Re-listen to it. And until next time, keep on drinking and binking. Bottoms up, bitches.